Larry, the Houthis claim that they caused damage to the USS Truman in the Suez Canal or Red Sea area. The Trump administration stated that the Chinese have a satellite in low Earth orbit that is helping the Houthis. So I thought maybe we could do a little quick update brief on the Houthis and the Middle East situation.
Okay. Well, I'd first start off by questioning anything the Houthis have to say is the truth, because everything I have read on the subject about the U.S. aircraft carrier Truman was that it collided with a merchant ship off the Suez Canal, nowhere near where the Houthis operate. So it's sort of like believing Hamas when they talk about civilian casualties.
Absolutely.
Unbelievable is the word to use to describe.
Good. That was going to be my first question to you, so you've already answered that one. Okay. Can we believe that Houthi claim? Because I heard the same thing, that they ran into a merchant ship.
Yeah. And as far as Chinese satellites, I'm sure they have Chinese satellites, and I'm sure that one way or another they're feeding all they can help the Houthis. My understanding was, originally anyways, it was Russian satellites. There was information on ships. The Houthis were attacking ships in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden, but they weren't attacking Chinese or Russian ships. They've been immune to all the Houthi attacks. And my understanding was that the Houthis were receiving the satellite information from Iran via Russian satellites. It could be that they were receiving them from Chinese. Doesn't matter. It's coming through Iran to the Houthis, and they're using them to target ships that aren't Russian or Chinese.
So you could certainly see to the advantage of the Chinese having the satellite to inform them when Chinese boats are coming through.
Yeah, and China's ships through the Suez Canal are up. Russian oil ships coming down from Russia into India and Pakistan and China with their oil has increased, but Western shipping is incurring significant costs in fuel and time delays. Containers are being tied up by having to travel all the way around the Cape of Good Hope in Africa, adding 2 to 3 weeks of travel time to Europe. Interestingly enough, I mean, the U.S. is the one doing all the legwork for Western civilization, and I think, 2 or 3% of our gross national foreign trade goes through Suez, so it's not really a big issue for us, other than the issue of freedom of the seas.
Yes.
And freedom of the seas is a big issue because we have the South China Sea, which China claims all of, so the freedom of the seas is a major issue, and the U.S. is addressing it.
But as we've discussed before, that should be an international issue, not just a U.S. issue.
Right. Not an international, Joy. That means Western Europe, which gets a lot of stuff through the Suez Canal, but it should also include Egypt. Egypt is suffering major loss of income because of the decreased shipping through the Suez Canal, and they're afraid to do anything because the Houthis are attacking Western civilization because they support Israel. So Egypt is afraid that if they support the U.S. in the West against the Houthis, they'll be seen as helping Israel. And so Egypt is concerned that there will be street violence and backlash if they support anything that could be perceived as helping Israel.
Understandable, but they were receiving a ton of U.S. aid.
Good point. And it seems to me that the U.S. should use some leverage on that and saying, if you don't help us here, we're not going to help you there. This reciprocity, as you well know, is one of my favorite words, has been long before Trump was using it in the last few months. That if a country treats us badly, or an organization like the UN, for example, treats us badly, then we should reciprocate by withholding all sorts of aid and assistance and whatever we can to say, hey, you don't treat us good, we're not going to treat you good. So.
Well, there's a pause in aid for now, so we'll see how that goes.
Yeah. And interestingly enough, it seems like the Houthis haven't been sending too many, as of today, which is April 23rd. They seem like they've sort of cut back on all their attacks on Western civilization, so Western shipping. So maybe the airstrikes by the U.S. against their sites is having some impact. I'm sure it will have some impact.
I did hear that they launched a missile at Israel, I think this morning or yesterday, yes. Yeah.
But it's not going to be a permanent solution unless the Houthis are taken out one way or another. And the Houthis are a Shia organization that controls roughly 30% of Yemen. The other 70% of Yemen is controlled by the central government or other factions thereof that are Sunni. And Shia Houthis are being supported by Shia Iran. So there's a religious aspect, but we'll see how this whole thing plays out. I'm not optimistic. On the other hand, there's some stories where 80 or 90,000 man army is being formed in Yemen to go after the Houthis. It's the only way
by Saudi,
by Saudis and Egypt. And certainly, I'm sure the U.S. is involved if that's the case. So if they take them out, then that's a step forward.
Yeah.
But the Houthis have done all this in the name of fighting against Israel's war in Gaza. That's the excuse.
And the head of this is Iran.
Yes.
With their proxies in Gaza and Hezbollah and the Houthis.
And whose slogan is death to America, death to Israel, death to Western civilization. So
do you think these nuclear talks the Trump administration is having now with Iran will include any kind of issue with the proxies and Israel?
Well, the nuclear bomb in Iran is a major threat. I personally think they already have it. I have no proof of that. It just seems to me they've been playing around with developing a bomb for years. They've certainly got the wherewithal to do it. So I think they've already got the bomb. They're just waiting for the proper time to announce they have the bomb. Because if they do announce it, there's a good chance Israel will launch attacks. And what the U.S. will do is up for grabs. I think having a nuclear bomb is a threat to the world. But to me, one of the biggest threats to the world with bombs is Pakistan, followed by North Korea. I mean, Pakistan's a Muslim country, and they have serious internal problems. And the Taliban and other Islamic terror groups operate in Pakistan. So if they get control of the Pakistan, that's a bigger threat to me, I think, than Iran, though they're both bad apples. So it's not a pleasant sight either way. And then if we go right down the whole rabbit hole, Joy, of threats, then you're talking about the biological threats and the chemical threats, and there's all sorts of threats to our world.
So from a peace through strength strategy on U.S. global leadership in the Middle East, how do we balance, because people are going to talk about, and they've already talked about, the humanitarian problem in Yemen that already existed, which will be exacerbated by all this.
Yes,
so the balance between the humanitarian issue and the need for peace and freedom of the seas.
Well, the humanitarian angle is a sad one indeed. But until you take out the cancer, the problem is going to continue. So you have to take out the cancer. And the analogy would be Gaza. I mean, how do you get rid of Hamas unless you just pulverize the heck out of Gaza? And so there is a humanitarian crisis in Gaza. The population, until at least recently, seemed to and voted continually in support of Hamas. So in a way, there are no civilians when the population is behind Hamas. But it's still sad to see people dying needlessly, and the whole thing could be over in a minute if Hamas released the hostages.
Yes, I agree.
The whole thing is where the Hamas, the Islamic jihad mentality of death doesn't mean anything to us, but for the cause. We're going to die for the sake of Allah and get rid of the Israelis.
And you spoke earlier about us, the missiles we sent into the ports and the different, fueling areas and refineries may have made an impact there. So I don't see how they're going to get humanitarian aid in if we do take out the port. That's
right. So there'll be suffering in Yemen, in the Houthi-controlled area anyways. So what are you going to do? You're going to have the freedom of the seas? You're going to have Western shipping continue to be assaulted without consequence? No, you got to do something.
Well, thank you for this brief, Larry, and your thoughts. Thank you to our listeners. Please subscribe, share, and comment on our YouTube and Rumble channels. And you can also follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Substack. You can listen to your favorite audio podcast on your Apple or Android phone. Thank you again, and join us next time for our brief on Peace Through Strength podcast.
Thank you, Joy.
Thank you.